Have you ever found yourself in a place that feels like it is straight out of a dream, or maybe a nightmare? A place that shouldn't exist, yet there you are, standing right in the middle of it. Tonight I'm going to tell you a story about a place just like that. A place known to a very few as the midnight train station. It all started on a cold, foggy night. I was driving home late after a long week at work, taking a back road I rarely used, hoping to cut some time. The fog was thick, like a heavy blanket, swallowing the beams of my headlights. Suddenly, my car sputtered and died. No warning, just silence. I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no cell service. Great. I decided to walk, hoping to find a house or a gas station. After what felt like an hour, a faint glow appeared through the fog. As I got closer, I saw it. An old ornate train station, looking like it was plucked right out of the 1920s. A beautifully carved wooden sign hung above the entrance, with the words "Midnight Station" elegantly painted on it. But there were no tracks, no town, just this station surrounded by an endless, misty forest. Curiosity got the better of my caution. I pushed open the heavy oak doors. The inside was even more stunning. A grand clock with Roman numerals hung on the far wall, its hands frozen at exactly 12. The air was still and smelled faintly of old wood and rain. Polished mahogany benches lined the waiting area, and gas lamps cast a warm, flickering light across the marble floor. It was completely empty. Not a single soul in sight. I walked over to the ticket counter. Behind the brass grill, everything was perfectly preserved. An old-fashioned ticket stamper, a ledger book lying open, and a neat stack of tickets. I picked one up. It was thick cardstock, beautifully printed, but there was no destination written on it, just a single, cryptic word: elsewhere. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed from outside. It sounded like a train approaching, but how I rushed to the window, peering out into the fog. Two bright lights cut through the haze, growing larger and larger. A magnificent, old-fashioned steam locomotive pulled into the station, gliding to a halt on tracks that hadn't been there moments before. It was silent, its arrival marked only by a gentle hiss of steam. The carriage doors slid open with a soft sigh, revealing interiors just as lavish as the station. Velvet seats, small tables with shaded lamps, and windows that looked out into pure, inky blackness. It was both inviting and deeply unsettling. As I stood there, mesmerized, a figure emerged from the train. He was a conductor, dressed in a crisp, dark blue uniform with gold trim. He had a kind face, with wrinkles around his eyes that suggested he smiled a lot. He tipped his hat to me. "Welcome to the midnight station," he said, his voice calm and gentle. "Are you traveling with us tonight?" I was speechless. I just pointed at the ticket in my hand. He nodded. "Ah, a ticket to elsewhere. A popular choice. The journey is transformative. Where does it go?" I finally managed to ask. He smiled again, a mysterious glint in his eyes. "Elsewhere is not a place you find on a map. It's a destination for those who are lost, for those who need a new beginning, or for those who simply need to find their way back to themselves. The journey is different for everyone." He gestured towards the open door of the train. "The choice is yours. You can board the train and see where elsewhere takes you, or you can turn around, walk back to your car, and it will start right up. You'll get home, and by morning, this will all feel like a strange dream." I looked from the conductor to the impossibly beautiful train, then back into the foggy night where my broken-down car was waiting. Part of me screamed to run, to get back to the familiar world I knew. But another, more adventurous part was captivated. What was elsewhere? What kind of transformation was he talking about? I thought about my life, the routine, the stress, the feeling that I was just going through the motions. Maybe this was a chance for something more, an escape, an adventure. But as I looked into the conductor's calm, knowing eyes, I realized something. This wasn't just a simple choice between a magical train ride and my normal life. The journey to elsewhere, it felt permanent, like I wouldn't be coming back, at least not as the same person. "Who are the other passengers?" I asked, noticing for the first time that the train wasn't entirely empty. Through the windows I could see silhouettes of people, sitting quietly, looking out at the station. "They are travelers, just like you," the conductor replied, "each with their own story, their own reason for being here. Some are running from something, others are running towards something. but all of them were seeking a change. I stood there on the platform, the silent train humming with a strange energy, the ticket to elsewhere feeling heavy in my hand. The idea of a new beginning was tempting, so incredibly tempting, to leave behind all my worries and start fresh. But I also thought about my family, my friends, the life I had built, flaws and all. Was I really ready to leave it all behind for an unknown destination? In that moment, I made my decision. I took a deep breath and handed the ticket back to the conductor. "Thank you for the offer," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "But I think I need to find my way back on my own." The conductor didn't seem surprised or disappointed. He simply took the ticket and tucked it into his pocket. "A brave choice," he said with a warm smile. "The path you know is often the hardest to walk. I wish you well on your journey." He tipped his hat one last time, turned, and stepped back onto the train. The doors slid shut, and with another silent hiss of steam, the locomotive began to pull away. It didn't chug or roar, it just glided into the fog and vanished as silently as it had appeared. The tracks disappeared with it. I stood alone in the station for a long moment. The grand clock was still frozen at midnight. Then, I turned and walked out, back into the foggy night. As the conductor had promised, when I reached my car and turned the key, the engine roared to life immediately. I never found that station again, no matter how many times I drove down that old back road. Was it real? Was it just a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and fog? I don't know for sure, but sometimes, when I feel lost or stuck, I think about the midnight station. I think about that ticket to elsewhere, and the choice I made. And you know what? I'm glad I chose to go back, because the conductor was right. The journey to change yourself doesn't require a magical train. It's a journey you take right where you are, one step at a time. The midnight station taught me that you do want to need to escape your life to find a new beginning. Sometimes, you just need a reminder that you have the power to change your own direction, right here, right now. Thanks for listening to my story tonight. If you have any experiences with strange, unexplainable places, I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more mysteries. See you next time. The footsteps echoed through the empty station, slow, heavy, like someone walking calmly across the platform tiles. My body froze. For a moment I thought maybe a passenger had somehow entered the station late, but then I remembered something. The station entrance doors automatically locked after midnight. No one should have been able to enter. The footsteps continued. Step, step, step. They were coming from the far end of the platform, exactly where the tunnel disappeared into darkness. My eyes instinctively started turning toward the sound. Then I remembered the paper. Rule number 2, at exactly 12:13 a.m., you may hear footsteps on the platform. Do not look directly toward the sound. My heart started beating faster. I looked up at the clock. 12:13 a.m. exactly. A cold wave of fear moved through my chest. This wasn't funny anymore. The footsteps came closer, closer, each step echoing through the silent station. Then suddenly, they stopped, right outside the security booth. I could feel it. Something was standing just beyond the glass window, but I refused to look. I kept staring at the desk. The silence stretched for what felt like minutes. Then finally, the footsteps continued, walking slowly down the platform, away from the booth. Only when the sound faded into the tunnel did I allow myself to breathe again. The man at the window for a while. Nothing else happened. The station returned to complete silence. I tried to convince myself that maybe someone had simply found a way inside. Maybe they had already left through another exit. But deep down, I knew that explanation didn't feel right. I looked again at the paper. The next rule waited quietly. Rule number 3, if someone asks when the next train will arrive, do not answer them. I shook my head. Ridiculous. But before I could think further, a voice suddenly spoke from outside the booth. Excuse me. My entire body jumped. Someone was standing at the window. I slowly raised my eyes. A tall man stood there. He wore an old dark coat that looked like it belonged to another decade. His skin was pale, almost gray under the fluorescent lights. But the strangest part was his eyes. They looked unfocused, like he wasn't fully aware of where he was. The man leaned slightly toward the glass. Then he asked the question, when does the next train arrive? My mind immediately flashed back to the rule. Do not answer them. For a moment I considered ignoring it. Maybe the paper was just a joke. Maybe this was a normal passenger who had somehow entered the station late. But something about the man made my instincts scream at me to stay quiet. So I said nothing. The man tilted his head slightly. "When does the next train arrive?" he repeated. His voice sounded different the second time. Lower, distorted, almost like two voices speaking at once. My hands tightened on the edge of the desk. Still, I stayed silent. The man stared at me for several seconds. Then slowly, a strange smile spread across his face. It wasn't a friendly smile. It looked wrong, too wide, too still. Finally, he stepped back from the window. Without another word, he turned and began walking down the platform. His footsteps echoed once again through the station. Step, 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 until they disappeared into the darkness of the tunnel. The flickering lights of the station was quiet again, but the silence now felt heavier, oppressive, like the air itself had thickened. I glanced again at the list of rules. There were still several left. My eyes drifted back to the clock. 12:27 a.m., just 3 minutes until 12:30. Something about that time made my stomach tighten. I didn't know why. Then suddenly, the lights flickered. Once, the station dimmed, then returned to normal. I froze in my chair. The lights flickered again, twice. My heart started pounding. I quickly looked down at the paper. Rule number 4, if the station lights flicker 3 times, close your eyes immediately. The lights flickered a 3rd time. Without hesitation, I shut my eyes. The darkness behind my eyelids felt strangely alive. For a moment, everything was silent. Then I heard something. A sound coming from the platform. Slow breathing, not mine. Something else was standing out there, very close to the booth. I could hear it inhaling, exhaling, right outside the glass. I wanted to open my eyes. Every instinct screamed at me to look, but I forced myself to stay still. Seconds passed. Then a new sound joined the breathing, a soft scratching noise, like fingernails dragging slowly across glass. The booth window. The scratching continued for several seconds. Then it stopped. The breathing faded away. The station returned to silence. Only then did I open my eyes. The platform was empty again, but deep scratch marks now covered the glass window. The sound of the train, my hands were shaking. The rules had been right so far, every single one. That realization made my chest tighten with fear. I slowly looked back at the paper. The next rule stared back at me. Rule number 5, at 12:30 a.m., you may hear a train approaching. This train does not appear on any official schedule. I looked at the clock, 12:29 a.m. Then the ground began to vibrate. At first it was subtle, just a faint tremor beneath my feet. Then the sound followed. A distant metallic roar echoing through the tunnel. The unmistakable sound of a subway train approaching the station. But that was impossible. No trains were scheduled at this hour. Yet the sound grew louder, closer. The vibration spread through the platform. Dust shook loose from the ceiling, and the wind from the tunnel began rushing toward the station. The train was coming. The sound of the train grew louder, a deep rumble that vibrated through the concrete floor of the station. Metal screeched against metal, a high-pitched scream that cut through the late-night silence. A sudden gust of wind shot out from the tunnel, a phantom breath that sent dust and old paper scraps dancing across the platform. Inside the small security booth, I slowly pushed myself to my feet. Every single instinct, every nerve ending in my body, screamed that something was terribly wrong. The rules, the strange typed-out rules they gave me for this job, flashed in my mind again. Rule number 6. Do not approach the train. Do not look inside the windows. Do not board the train. The headlights appeared first. 2 piercing white lights, slicing through the suffocating darkness of the tunnel. They swelled, growing larger and brighter as the train barreled closer. But there was something off about them. The light felt cold, colder than any headlight I'd ever seen. It was a pale, almost sterile glow that didn't seem to illuminate anything beyond its own beam. The train itself rolled into the station with an unnerving slowness. Its wheels let out a prolonged, agonizing scream against the tracks as it ground to a halt. The doors, with perfect mechanical precision, lined up with the yellow safety line on the platform, and then everything went quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that felt louder than the noise that came before it. From the relative safety of my booth, I stared at the train. The windows were completely dark. Not tinted, not reflective from the station lights, just black, an absolute, impenetrable black, like staring into the abyss of the deep ocean at night. There were no passengers visible, no movement, no sign of life, nothing. Then, with a sharp hiss that echoed through the empty station, the doors slid open. The mechanical sigh of the pneumatics sounded like a beckoning call in the dead air. The train was waiting for someone, or something, to board. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I had to force myself, physically and mentally, to stay inside the booth, to keep my hand away from the door handle. Another rule surfaced from the depths of my memory, the words practically glowing in my mind. Rule number 7, if the train doors open, remain inside the booth, no matter what you hear. At first, nothing happened. The doors remained open, dark invitations into a silent, empty vessel. The train just stood there, a patient predator at the platform. Then I heard it, a voice. It was soft, almost a whisper, but it was achingly familiar. "Aren't you getting on?" My blood ran cold. The voice, it was the exact voice of my older brother. My brother who had died in a car accident 3 years ago. Slowly, against my better judgment, against every screaming instinct, my eyes drifted toward the train windows. And that was my mistake. Shapes began to form inside the blackness. They were faint at first, like smudges on a dirty lens. But as I watched, they gradually sharpened, became clearer. Figures, dozens of them, standing inside the train, packed shoulder to shoulder. They were perfectly still, a silent congregation watching the platform, watching me. Their faces were pale, waxy, and utterly expressionless. Their eyes were hollow and empty, like the painted eyes of porcelain dolls. Then something else happened, something that broke the chilling stillness. One of them moved, a tall figure, towering over the others, stepped closer to the window, its face pressed slowly, deliberately, against the glass. The skin looked stretched and unnatural, like old leather pulled too tight over bone, and then its mouth opened, slowly, into a wide, impossibly wide smile that didn't reach its dead eyes. The figure lifted its arm, a slow, jerky motion, and waved at me. My heart felt like it was going to stop. It was a direct, personal acknowledgement. Another rule, a frantic one this time, flashed in my mind. Rule number 8. If someone inside the train waves at you, do not wave back. The figure continued its slow, hypnotic wave. Its smile grew wider, more grotesque. One by one, the other figures inside the train started to turn their heads towards me. A sea of pale, smiling faces, all watching, all waiting. The train doors were still open, still inviting. Then I heard footsteps, not from the train, behind me, inside the station. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. The tall man from earlier, the one who'd seemed so normal when he asked about the next train, was standing near the stairs leading up from the platform. But it wasn't the same man. Something was horribly, fundamentally wrong with him. His body looked distorted, stretched, his limbs elongated. His arms hung strangely low, his fingers nearly brushing the ground. His head was tilted at an angle that would have snapped a normal person's neck. He began to walk, a slow, deliberate shuffle, toward the open train. Step, step, step. As he moved, the silent figures inside the train suddenly became animated. A ripple of excitement passed through them. Their heads turned in unison to follow his progress. Their smiles stretched even wider, a silent, hungry chorus. The man stopped directly in front of an open train door. Then he turned his head slightly, that broken neck angle allowing him to look directly at me. His smile stretched across his face, a rictus of pure madness. "See," he said, his voice a soft, conspiratorial whisper. "The train always comes." Then he stepped inside. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the lights inside the train flickered on with a hum. For the first time, I could see everything clearly, and the sight made me want to scream. The passengers weren't just people. Their bodies were twisted, broken. Some had hollowed out eye sockets. Others had mouths stretched impossibly wide, frozen in silent screams. But the worst part, the part that made my stomach churn, was that some of them looked familiar. Faces from old news reports, missing person posters I'd seen around town, people who had vanished without a trace, years ago. all standing silently, patiently, inside this nightmare train. The doors suddenly slammed shut with a deafening bang. The figures inside turned their heads back toward the windows, back toward me. Every single one of them was smiling. Then, the train began to move, slowly at first, the metal wheels grinding against the rails with a mournful groan. The cold headlights pierced the darkness of the tunnel ahead, and the last thing I saw was the tall, stretched figure inside the train, pressing its face against the glass, still waving its long, pale hand. Then the train vanished into the blackness, and the station became silent once again. I looked at the clock above the platform. Its hands pointed to 12:47 a.m. My legs felt like jelly as I collapsed back into the chair in my booth. My hand trembled as I looked down at the typed list of rules again. But something had changed. A new line had appeared at the bottom of the page, written in a shaky, spidery handwriting. Words that hadn't been there a few minutes ago. You followed the rules. You survived the first night. And below that, another sentence was slowly, magically fading into existence on the paper, the ink appearing as if from nowhere. One that made my stomach drop and my blood run cold. See you tomorrow night. And that's when the terrifying truth hit me. This wasn't just a job. It was a shift, a sentence, and the train. The train would be back. Every single night, at 12:30, and my shift was just beginning. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one.